has to do with, coastal reformation and all the different, things they do with planting mangroves and, restoration, not reformation, restoration. And, she's also the chief, conservation officer or director. She's the conservation director, not the chief, but for Starbright. And so they collaborate with all the efforts and things that she does. And, she does really a lot of great things. Like she'll go and do beach cleanups and find found things all over the beach. And she makes these beautiful pieces of artwork with them. And her husband, Derek, is also a very good friend of mine. And he's an artist, a marine artist as well, and a marine designer. And he does a lot of work, a lot of the same kind of work I do with all the apparel and different things like that for people. And then he does a lot of work for AFCO and Starbright as well. So they kind of got me involved with promoting it on the show because we were all about conservation, coastal conservation, healthy fisheries, all that kind of stuff here on the show. So one night they were joking around, and I think Corey had a misstep of words, and she said do-gooder. Right, you got to do gooder or whatever, and then everybody kind of made fun of her. She's like, no, wait, do-gooder. It's like a do-gooder. You're a do-gooder. So they came up with this hashtag do-gooder. And so each week we spotlight a do-gooder on the show, and they get this whole bucket full of Starbright stuff. There's the salt off and the the boat wash and the sponge and the degreaser and all that stuff like that. So I'm going to announce, I like rolling out the show with announcing the do-gooder of the week. So this week's do-gooder is Adam Sadr, Sadr, and he is on the water almost daily working charter boats, and he is a good do-gooder. He's always picking up floating debris. He sends videos often when working the party boat and also other charter boats. And he's worked with Starbright for a while, and also with Corey and Derek when they owned All Water Adventures. So he runs shark trips also out of Port Canaveral. She says he's a good dude, and he is our do-gooder of the week. So congratulations, Adam. You get your bucket full of good stuff, and I'm sure Corey's going to be sending that to you soon. So another thing I want to just mention before we get rolling, very important thing. This is our first episode with a new sponsor. So have you guys ever tried this W sauce?
I have
Baron
not.
Burton's W sauce. It's incredible. A good friend of mine is involved with this company, and they're sponsoring the podcast now. So I'm just going to make mention, W sauce is now on board with us as America's Worcestershire. There's the official magic cooking sauce. I think they described it to me. I'm like, well, what is it? They're like, well, it's magic cooking sauce. I don't know how to describe it. It's really, really good. And they're right. It is really, really good. So this is Baron Burton's W sauce. So welcome to the Connected by Water podcast, W sauce. So we're excited to have you guys on board. Right. And also excited to have on board here today are today's guests. We got John Miklos from Biotech Consulting and Beau Williams from Aquatic, right?
Yes,
and you guys are connected by water, certainly. If we talk about connected by water on this show, right? That's the name of the show. But we bring people in here that are connected to us by water, and it doesn't really get more connected than what you guys are going to talk about today. Literally connected by water, and you two are, but everything you do is connected by water. You jointly created Aquaticus. All right, so why don't you guys tell me a little bit about what you did with both your consulting agencies and how that came to be?
Go ahead, John.
So I have an environmental consulting firm called Biotech Consulting. We do a lot of permitting for a lot of development, but a lot of coastal areas, also a lot of restoration with mitigation banking and that type of thing. So I've been involved in the regulatory aspect of the environmental world for the last 30 years.
Okay.
And all aspects, uplands, wetlands, coastal areas, Florida, all over the U.S. as well, and some areas in the Caribbean. I met Beau along the way, and with what Beau was doing, we tried to find some synergy. And Beau, you want to talk about Aquatec a little bit?
Yeah, so I've been doing seagrass restoration and mangroves and coral and oysters for over 20 years now. So
Okay.
Previously, I was with a company called Seagrass Recovery, where we 100% concentrated on just seagrass. We were instrumental in working in the Florida Keys when boats run aground.
Mhm.
We did a lot of rapid response for groundings and stuff like that. We also did some projects in Texas when I started Aquatic. So generally between, my background in seagrass and John's background with the permitting and his part of the coastal area, we kind of decided that we wanted to start growing grasses and make it a large scale operation for being able to grow more plants.
Yeah, we wanted to find a way to kind of work together a little bit more than we were. And we saw kind of a gap in the market, if you will, in terms of folks out there actively pursuing the growth of seagrass and any submerged vegetation for that matter. And really the ability to do it, because it's a lot easier to grow the emergent stuff. You can grow them in pots and everything else, but to grow seagrass or SAV, you need a little more dedicated facility. So we tinkered with the idea for a while, and then finally Beau drops this property on our lap. And
nice. Well, I'd like to formally welcome to both of you guys to the Connected by Water podcast, powered by Joey Cardi Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, and fueled by our good friends at Papa's PLR Rum. Remind you never to be a spectator. All right. I want to ask you, what is SAV?
Submerged aquatic vegetation.
Submerged aquatic vegetation. So it's a general blanket term for submerged, like all kinds of plants that live underwater.
That's the best way to talk about it when you say, like, if you want to talk about seagrass, which is marine seagrass,
right?
Or if you want to talk about SAV, like in the Loxahatchee River, that would be an SAV, not a seagrass.
Okay.
So when you use the term submerged aquatic vegetation, you kind of cover everything submerged.
Right.
So
that's great. So you guys are casting a wide net when
right.
it comes to all this stuff. You're not just focusing on one thing.
Correct. Yeah. Like, so this Wednesday, we actually have a crew that's going to be here in the Loxahatchee River out putting in 5,000 plants in the Loxahatchee River for FWC Foundation.
Oh, wow.
On Wednesday. So
nice.
And that's all eelgrass.
Yep. All eelgrass.
Okay.
So we're happy to be working with them and doing a lot more with the fact that we have the facility now, which is, it's just a larger area for us to be able to segregate different plant species and different cultivars or different grass. So, like you wouldn't want to have a specific cultivar, maybe a cold water cultivar or something closer to the springs where we could actually use something from a lake down here in the Loxahatchee River.
Awesome. So, like, from a conservation standpoint and like a regrowth standpoint, you have to both see what you're doing as like a very important mission for everything that we're dealing with right now in the state of Florida, which
absolutely.
is, I mean, we're in dire like circumstances here, and I think personally, I feel when Governor DeSantis stepped in, he did so many tremendous things for the Everglades and restoration, and he continues to do so. And hopefully that's had a positive effect on the mission that you guys are venturing into with Aquaticus.
Yeah, definitely, and very supportive of a lot of the actions that Governor DeSantis has taken. We've, again, we started down this path as, one, we wanted to do some more work together, but two, we saw some of these opportunities that were kind of out there, but nobody was really pursuing them. And we really got things going a couple of years ago with the Apopka project, I would say, working with St. Johns River Water Management District, planning, how many?
We did 24 last year and 24 this year.
Yeah, 24,000
acres. 24 acres.
24 acres
okay.
with
240,000 plants.
Yeah, 240,000 plants over those areas. Both eelgrass and Illinois pondweed.
So are you taking areas that have been like decimated and then regrowing them, or are you just kind of like just building new like biomes on your own here?
Well, when you talk about Apopka, Lake Apopka is its own animal. It's it's a microcosm of what you see with Lake O, for instance.
Right.
It's large lake, very huge, but decades and decades of muck farming, particularly on the north shore of that lake, just decimated. It went from this crystal clear, beautiful, world-renowned bass lake to nearly a cesspool. I mean,
right.
it just literally disgusting what it turned into, and so many issues on that north shore, pesticide overloads that had bird kills and all kinds of things happened. That when the state came in, bought all that land, they've been slowly trying to reclaim it and restore it, keep that nutrient influx from getting into Lake Apopka, which is part of the headwaters, the Ocklawaha River and everything else that flows to the St. John's, that flows out to the Atlantic. And there's been a process going on, but it is very slow and takes a lot of time and takes a lot of money. And there's different mechanisms that they're using to try to restore the health of the lake. When we won the contract to do the planning in the lake, I'll admit I was extremely skeptical because the lake looks like split pea soup. I mean,
really?
It is. It's from a limnological standpoint, we use a Siki disc. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a black and white disc you use to look for water clarity.
Okay.
And the deeper it goes, and obviously the better the clarity. And what's the Siki disc readings out there? 3 inches?
Probably, if even that.
3 to 6 inches. Below that, you can't ascertain the difference between the black and white panels on the lake. I mean, it's
really,
it is very bad, and that's why it's.
Are there any fish living in there?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a tremendous population of gizzard shad, which is a noxious fish that's not good for the nutrient cycle. But the bass population has been coming back in that lake over the years, and a lot due to the efforts of the Water Management District and FWC and DEP to try to restore that lake. And, when we got the gig, and I was like, man, I just don't know if anything's going to grow out here. And it has been wildly successful.
Really?
It's been amazing.
What's that water testing out as? I mean, is there a lot of chemical buildup in there?
It's mainly the flocculent sediment, so it's just like the muck that's at the bottom. So if you ran your boat through there, you would just see a big, like a brown mud trail behind you.
Okay.
And even if you're in 4 feet of water, it's just, you can see the bubbles.
Historically, it's a beautiful sand bottom lake.
Okay.
And now, because of the decades of all that muck farming and nutrient loading into that system, I mean, there's areas where there's just feet of this sludgy, slimy sediment that you just run your hand through the water and it stirs it up. Is
that natural?
No, that's from all this nutrient buildup and all the runoff from. So that's what created the degradation of the lake.
So, all right. So I'm glad you brought up the R word, which is runoff, right? Which we feel is like the major issue in this entire state. Like I feel at least like that's the biggest problem. And people want to talk about, especially, with the beds and it spills out into our reefs. And I think that's a big problem why our reefs are dying too, is because the runoff that's coming out from the middle of the state as well, right? That's it spills right out into our inlets and right onto the reef. And I mean, I'm just a firm believer. Like, I almost think like the stuff should be outlawed in the state of Florida. I mean, we named this show Connected by Water because I'm a native Floridian, and I just look at this entire state as one big river, basically, that we happen to live on. And like you said before, with the lake, and it goes into the St. John's and it goes out into the Atlantic, and it's like it's all connected by water, right? So runoff. Tell me your thoughts on runoff.
So I mean, I live in Tampa, so it's even like, it makes me sick. I live on the Hillsborough River.
Okay.
But so whenever, like all the stuff, and it pours down rain, and you see it going right into the river, like you see the drains just, and it's like, you're like all this oil, everything from everybody's cars, all this, the first thing that it does is goes right down and goes into the river. And, you see, into Tampa Bay too, like they have all these storm drains that are clogged up and stuff. But, you look at other countries and all where they have these things that will go in, and they have to go, like the water goes in, it cleans them out, and then they have to go in and clean those out. But if you talk to an elected official, they're like, oh, but that's a lot of money it takes to clean all that,
Right.
And it's kind of like, well, like, so?
Yeah, don't you have a lot of money?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And shouldn't we be cleaning the waterways?
Right.
Runoff irritates me more than anything, so.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I try not to get like overly political on the show, but the one time we do bring politics in on it is when you talk about clean water, because that's the only way to get anything done, right? So it's kind of like, and we try to not to get like, too deep in any kind of like political conversation, but it does take money, it does take effort. I mean, no one's going to do this for free. I mean, and no one's going to do it. You got to make a living. You got to like pay your bills, and no one's going to do it.
Right.
Without there being some sort of money behind it. So, I'm happy at least the state's doing something about it to help out those that want to help it out.
Yeah, and look, from a regulatory standpoint, new construction, it checks all the boxes. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like construction or development, but ultimately, new construction gets there. The treatment levels meet the criteria. The DEP notes different areas as impaired basins, and it requires extra levels of treatment, and those things I believe work. The problem is the historic stuff, and that's the kind of things you're pointing at, Beau,
Really?
where it's been there for so long. I mean, keep in mind the water management district rules and all the treatment and all these things. That stuff really didn't get a lot of legs until the late 80s. So anything in place before that is basically grandfathered.
It's grandfathered in, right?
So you're stuck. I mean, like I got a place in Key West and love going down there, great place, but everything just runs right off the island, right into the water. And, you know, thank God they got rid of the septic systems down there and got it on sewer, or there'd be nothing left of it. But, you know, dealing and DEP in conjunction with EPA has made some efforts to deal with some of these historic things. There's something called BMAPs, Basin Management Action Plans. And there's a path for these different basins that you've got to reach certain water quality and reduced loading of nutrients into systems over a period of time. That's requiring...
Can't they create like subsidies to give them incentive to also like change their systems?
Well, some of that is there, but some of it, they're just on the hook. So there's a timeline in a lot of these places where they have to go in and do things.
Okay.
What a lot of the municipalities have done to date is call it the low-hanging fruit, the things that help: street sweeping, adding some swales, baffle boxes, those type of things, which help. I mean, it does reduce nutrient load, but ultimately a lot of these municipalities are going to have to implement, you know, significant programs to start reducing their loading before they start getting fined and whatever else, which they end up getting fined. That'll create the funding that we're talking about.
Right.
The plan's in place. Is it moving quick enough? Probably not for everybody, but at least it's tracking in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what you guys are doing really is really just so grandly and vastly important. It's why I wanted to bring you guys on. And we talk about on this show, we talk about, the do-gooders, for example, like, and what people can do like in their local areas. And, you know, while that's all fine and good, I think ultimately what that does, and someone once said on the show to me, it's like, well, you can't diminish any cleanup is good cleanup. Any positive step toward it is a good positive step towards it. But really, is it not really putting a great dent in what's going on, like truthfully? But I think it does more to inspire others when people say, oh, we're doing a beach cleanup and I'm posting up about it and I cleaned up all this garbage or picked up all this trash, or, you know, look at this runoff or look at this vegetation. They raise awareness of it. It's like, I think ultimately it's just creating a culture for everyone to realize that it's in our hands, and that we all, as citizens of the state, need to take it as our personal responsibility to, like, we share all this with everybody, and the actions that we take really do affect it directly. Speaking, so
absolutely, and some of the issues we run into, like Beau and I were just meeting with FWC last week in Tallahassee, and you know, the talk of linking habitat value to redfish management. You know, I was surprised to hear that comment. And,
so explain to me about what those talks are about. That's interesting.
So I
think
we can, but I mean, we just
came out the other day.
Yeah, I just don't know the details of it, but you know,
well, give me the general idea of it.
That, you know, you've got areas that have limited seagrass and limited habitat, that the take on
this was in Charlotte Harbor the other day.
On redfish in that area is going to be diminished or
catch and release only.
Yeah, become catch and release. Because the ecosystem in that particular location isn't enough to sustain, you know, the population that's there or promote the populations that's there. So,
and it limits the amount of people that want to come in there and go, like, you know, if you can't go catch the fish, then maybe you might not go back into this area and go destroy some seagrass by your propeller, or, you know, ripping it up with your anchor or whatever.
Okay.
Just to go catch the fish that you can't take.
Well, they've been doing that with snook over there on that coast for a couple of years
snook
now,
and
right?
tarpon, yeah.
Well, Nick, how long has it been? Like, this is probably like 3 or 4 years they've been doing that snook, right? Yeah, they can't take any snook, like, no matter season or not. But they're talking about doing that with redfish too?
We just heard that last week. Yeah.
Okay.
So
interesting.
But the seagrass angle is something, obviously, one of Beau's passions, and I've been very interested in it. And, you know, we saw the opportunity to get more involved in it. Beau and I are working on permitting a seagrass mitigation bank in Pasco County right now, off 2 miles off the coast, right before you get to Anclote Key. And then just more involvement in dealing with seagrass and looking for opportunities to work in that area, because we know the value of it, we know the benefits of it, and we're looking to just do more with it.
Okay.
It's kind of an area that people stay away from because everybody likes it and likes to hear about it, but not everybody sees it and not really understands it either.
So for the benefit of the audience, like those listening and those watching, so you guys are going out and you're planting these. What's your process and how you're actually making these banks?
But why don't you tell them about our project that's coming up?
Well, so not so much the banks. It's more that we do some restoration aquaculture right now. So it's kind of a newer term they're starting to use, try to get aquaculture people into doing restoration work. And so now it's like you can do it with clams and with seaweed. So they really haven't figured out the process of making it work logistically with seagrass yet. So that's where John and I are working on trying to get in front of, to say, listen, if you're doing restoration work or aquaculture work, then possibly you could be doing restoration aquaculture, because the more grass we have available, the more grass we can go out and actually plant. Mm-hmm. So we utilize data from like St. John's River Water Management District or South Florida, but we'll find out where seagrasses previously were, and then we have at our farm, in our facility, we actually have grasses growing at the facility. And so we could take the grasses from there and come out like Hair Club for Men and go put it out here, And so we come take it up from over there and put it over here. And then, if there's an area where like the Loxahatchee River, where we're afraid the turtles or some manatees may eat it, we may fence those off with exclusion cages, and then
let them mature.
Let them mature and grow. Then move the cage out of the way, so that way it'll grow. So, there's different methods. There's different ways you actually transplant and grow the grass. Mm-hmm. It's just not a one size fits all. Like if I handed you a piece of grass and was like, here, you can grow this in your aquarium, and every week you can go out and take and put it in the bay, you're probably not going to make that big of a difference. But if you put 50 to 100,000 plants out, then you can do that. So this year we're working with Ecosphere Restoration Institute, and we're putting 100 acres of seagrass in statewide.
Okay.
So we're actually going to do some work up in the Panhandle and say Perito Bay, Pensacola area, St. Joe's Bay, Tampa, Sarasota, Charlotte Harbor, Indian River Lagoon, and possibly Biscayne Bay or some in the Keys.
Something in the Keys, hopefully.
Yeah, right.
So we're kind of spreading it out statewide. But we've got the experience and knowledge, and then so now we're going to the areas that had seagrass, and if it's got good water quality, again, like John was saying with the Secchi desk, we'll go in and we'll check to see if there's good light penetration, good visibility, what the nutrient load is, what the sediment is, and if it's not good, we won't use that site. So, it's something.
Yeah, and if our plan works, we create then a handful of donor sites kind of spread around in some areas that need them, hopefully with some land-based nurseries affiliated, and then continue that process as we go on, and then leapfrog those areas and create additional nursery donor sites. So when you get enough of it going, then the only cost is some transplanting. Because right now, getting out and you've got to go collect it, and you've got to get this permit, you got to get that permit, and we're trying to cut that down so that Beau mentioned earlier, rapid response, which is one of his big deals. He can talk about that a little bit, but having the ability to have areas we can get grass from and get it to other areas that need it or can support it is a big thing that's not really readily available today. And we can do it with almost any other plant. I can't think of a plant that we can't do it with. Mangroves, everything, freshwater, it's pretty easy to go get hundreds, thousands of whatever and go throw them in the ground somewhere. But seagrass is a different animal.
Yeah, seagrass is not. The stock's not available. So
you got to grow it.
You got to grow it, and then you also have to have the initial stock to be able to grow your nursery stock.
Okay.
So it's kind of like if you had hibiscus in your yard, and I was like, hey, can I come get some hibiscus from you? You're like, sure. propagules, take them, plant them, and then I get my own plants. Well, the seagrass, you got to go to the state with it, and you're like, hey, I need to get some seagrass, and they're like, not today,
Yeah.
But so we happen to have the availability to get grass, and it's a private stock of actual donor material that we can get.
Yeah, for the most part, anywhere that seagrass is growing, I'm saying this generally, is owned by the state of Florida. There are a handful of private areas that are privately owned bottom that you can harvest seagrass from.
With a permit.
But yeah, most of the time, we're talking coastal areas. Once you get below the mean high water elevation, that's 99 times out of 100 owned by the state.
Well, Harbor Branch has been doing a great job. They're collecting fragments, and Dr. Hanasak up there has been growing grasses there, and we talked with him a lot. We saw him at the World Seagrass Conference in Annapolis, and once he saw the size of our facility, he was like, man, I thought I was doing good, and he was like, I got like 5 tanks, you guys got 700,
Yeah, so, tell Dennis a little history on the facility.
So there's a World Seagrass Conference.
Yeah.
It's
in Italy next year. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I do. Actually,
2 years. Actually,
when I talked to him on the phone, I'm like, I kind of geek out about all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know if you guys are going to educate me for sure, but it's like I get so into hearing about all this.
The great thing about it, we went to Annapolis for a couple days, and it was up there, and good group of people. We had people from all over the world. I think there was a guy from Hong Kong,
Sweden,
people from Scandinavia area. It was very interesting, and wasn't a big conference, but we actually had a great showing from the state of Florida. Harbor Branch was there, DEP, St. John's.
It was. I thought it was awesome. Like I said, I've been doing it for so long. When I met my wife, she was like, what do you do? And I was like, I do seagrass. And she's like, she's like, do you get paid to do this?
Like sort of.
I'm like, yeah, not right now, but I will.
Not exactly my knight in shining armor, but thanks.
But so was it? Well, 4 years ago, a guy, I was looking for this property in near Tampa, and a good friend of mine was like, he's a broker, and he was like, hey, you got to come see this piece of property. It's amazing. I've been trying to, find places for you, because I wanted to get kind of like a fish farm type place. And so he says he found this place, and I go out and I look at it, and this place, it hadn't been operable in almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And, it had all these concrete tanks overgrown with brush.
This is in Tampa?
This is in Tampa. We're talking like the worst. I'll show you a picture when we get it. But
I went to Ringling for art school, so I lived in Sarasota for a while, so I'm familiar with the Tampa area. So I got a good picture.
I-4, I-75.
Okay.
Yeah, right by the Hard Rock.
Gotcha.
So anyway, so I go out, I'm looking, and I'm like, John's gonna kill me, there's no way. And so I sent him a picture, and he was like, yeah, we can find a better place. So we ended up negotiating with this guy for a couple of years, and ended up getting it. But the funny part about it is that the place was built in 1925, so it's the oldest and largest aquaculture facility in the state of Florida. This gentleman, Albert Greenberg, he was born in the Ukrainian Sea. With his parents are both American citizens.
Right. Hung out with Edison.
Yeah, grew up in Chicago. So he was he loved water lilies and stuff. So he was growing all these things in his basement in Chicago. So he decides, like the Beverly Hillbillies, hey, if I'm going to do this, I got to go to Florida because it's not working in Chicago. So he comes to Florida, has a small place in downtownish Tampa, and as he's driving his Model T out there, it overheats. And he's walking this piece of property looking for water, and there's a spring on the property, and so he's like, Eureka, I found it. So he bought all the property. It's called Eureka Springs Road. Okay. And so he built this property with all the plants, water plants, underwater plants, and he was doing it more for ornamental gardens, fish ponds and stuff like that.
Like Monet stuff.
Not restoration stuff. Yeah. Right. So then he gets sick. He ends up giving the facility to 2 employees, gives the 30 acres of the park to Hillsborough County in perpetuity as a park. And then, then it goes, the employees are like, we know how to grow the plants, not sell the plants.
Yeah, right. They ran it into the ground.
Literally. And so then it sat, they didn't pay the taxes. And so it sat for, it went on a tax sale. Somebody bought it. and they put up for like $10 million the next day,
Wow.
And so then it was like they sat. That's why it sat empty for 20 years. But we picked up. We've been working on it for the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
but we've been bringing everybody there. We bring in DEP, St. John's, Southwest, Florida Fish, UF.
Well, like the first day we had it, we had just gotten the contract for FWC for doing some plants, and like we had plants that I had in my facility. I was growing grass in a warehouse by Busch Gardens.
Really?
Yeah, and so like LED lights. I'm thinking I was like, if these things were those metal halide lights, they'd probably think I was growing weed in here or something.
Right.
But
your electric bill would say so.
So we had the plants, so we like took them out and put them into the tanks at the farm. Like it looked like a junk pit. And we're after we see them, they're like, they're like, these are the plants. They're like, yeah. It's like, how long have they been growing there? We're like, today.
Right.
But anyway, so
but it worked out, and the facility's it's pretty stout right now.
How big is the place?
It sounds very small, but when I say it's 3.23 acres, but the whole first 1 acre of it is all like concrete tanks, like 700-gallon tanks.
Okay. We got that. How many? 200. How many? How many of the tanks?
400.
400. I can't count.
And there is
me neither. At art school.
At one point, we had plants for Lake George. We were doing a project in Lake George. We had some for Lake Toho. We've had the ones for the Loxahatchee River. I mean, all these ones growing in different segregated areas to where like FWC was coming out and actually taking clippings of the plants to verify the DNA to see if the genes were the same ones that we had pulled from the area that we started growing them from.
Okay.
So they're really concerned about genetics right now. So there's like, whether this grass is going to be, a hybrid or if it's a native grass, because they don't want to go spread a bunch of hybrids around the state.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I mean, there's two schools of thought. One is get grass in the ground, get it growing. But the other is, if you can fix the problem, you're gonna fix it correctly, so that you can continue to have the growth and the correct genome spreading through that particular ecosystem.
Yeah, like put back what was there before, right?
Exactly.
That's the whole to
recreate the native condition.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now you guys cross over into mangroves as well?
So we recently built a mangrove mitigation bank in Ruskin.
Okay.
There's a group out of Louisiana, southern states. I can't ever pronounce the original company name. J.M. Burgess, something like that. I think it's the oldest privately held company in the state of Louisiana. Old family firm. They're akin to like a Rayonier or a St. Joe, something like that. Lots of timberland, lots of ag land, mineral rights, that type of thing. And they got involved in the mitigation banking world in Louisiana because it's a big deal out there with gas and oil permitting and everything else. And they kind of branched into Florida. So they bought this, it was a permitted site. They didn't have to permit it, but it's a mangrove mitigation bank. And one of the things that Beau does a lot of with Aquatic is called hydroblasting, where he goes into areas that were previously mosquito ditched, and which is where they used to go and just bring in a drag line, pull the dirt out, throw it on the side, and try to get the mosquito population controllable. So Beau gets his guys out there, dirty work. You can talk about it if you want, and just blast the dirt back into the ditch and basically try to recreate that historic situation. So Beau handled that aspect of it. My company handled all the post-permit compliance, the heavy equipment construction, drone work, monitoring, and then in the middle of it, the guys decided they wanted to do some mangrove planting. So Aquaticus steps in, and what did we harvest out there?
10,000.
Yeah, 10,000 seeds and sprouts, and went and got them all growing up, and it went really well. We didn't have any trouble at all with that. I mean, it was a very smooth process getting all those
the propagals.
We had propagals and just pure seeds, right?
The whites.
The whites were seeds, and just everything worked like magic. And you guys planted all that too, right? Yeah. So all that went back in the ground, and that's a fully restored. I think it's 400 acres.
That happens around here all the time.
Fully restored, like 400 acre mitigation area right on Tampa Bay.
Yeah, okay. I got to link you up with Corey and some of the work that they're doing. I think it'd be real interesting to see. I mean, and I'll show you after the show too. I'll take you through the social and like show you all the great things that they're doing.
Is she with IFAS?
I don't think so. Maybe, I don't know.
She's the one you did a podcast with, right?
No, we haven't done a podcast with her yet. Yeah, no, we haven't done a podcast with her yet, but they're involved with the whole Starbright and bringing that in and stuff like that. But but they're planting mangroves. She's been doing it for 20 years. You know what I mean? And it's funny. It's like, although I love the guys from Mang, and they say, no, we're going to buy a shirt, we'll plant a mangrove, and it's a great program to do. I'm not taking away from anything that they do, and those guys are awesome guys. I know them. I've met them, hung out with them at the boat shows and stuff like that. But she's been doing it for like way longer than anybody has. Just like as a native of Indian River, and seeing firsthand how bad that situation's gotten over the years. Her and Derek have just taken it into their own two hands and said, we're going to start planting mangroves.
Well, and we did the mangroves the first run in some of our tanks, but now we've kind of got the back of our property cleaned out, and we've got plenty of area back there. We're looking at doing more containerized mangroves, but we're looking at all the aspects of kind of that ecosystem. I mean, we just started out like hoping we could get away and do some seagrass work, and now we're looking at mangroves, we're looking at clams, we're looking at oysters.
Nice.
And how we.
What are you doing with oysters? Because we were working on some oyster programs with the CCA, and they're doing more oyster stuff up there. But we were starting to do some testing down here. I was working with the Broward County chapter of the CCA, and with Mike Lambrooks, who's the CCA president of our Broward chapter, and he's the vice president of all CCA in the state. He's actually running for the commissioner seat in Fort Lauderdale right now, and I really hope he gets elected, because from our perspective and everything that we're talking about, he's going to do vast and great things with which we need it here. The Fort Lauderdale sewer system has been having issues and breaking and becoming too mature and just having these spills. And we're working with a company called Clean Waterways that they have like basically built this glorified protein skimmer that cleans the water after spills and stuff like that. They've been doing a great job. But we worked on this oyster program with the discs that they would put into the water and trying to see if, now the whole point of the program was to collect data to see if it would work or to see what kind of growth. And we got some good growth in some areas and some not good growth in other areas. So it was criticized because people were thinking, oh, so you're not growing clams. It's like, well, and it's like, well, no, it's like, it's basically oysters primarily, but they're like, no, we're just testing to see if we could.
Right.
And that was the whole point of the program. But take me through some of the stuff you guys are doing.
So, well, one of the things we're doing, since we have the facility now on the farm, is going to start going to the local places that sell oysters and start doing the oysters recycling, so we can bring out the used oyster shells out to the facility, let the ants do their thing in the back, and then we'll take those oysters back out and do restoration projects with them.
Right.
So we'll start, recycling the recycle program where I'll have somebody go. And I just hired a young man from, he was at the University of North Florida, and he was running the whole oyster recycling program for the Chattahoochee Bay Alliance. So now he's going to bring that back into where we can start utilizing the oyster shell. I mean, I was talking with somebody the other day, and they were like, oyster shell, like used oyster shell is like gold. I mean, if you can get it, it's like,
really
get it. Because the oyster spat will attach to it, and, you can use that as a base.
Right.
And so, it's better than just throwing out limestone rock or the other alternatives for getting it to grow on. So, we're doing, that's one aspect we're doing. We also have another venture that we work with where we have a heavy lift drone, and we can go out and put oyster spat and clam seed out into areas where it may not be accessible by boat or a barge without doing more damage to seagrass.
Sure.
So then you can go in and, tell it to go over to, this place and put the oyster shell out or the oyster seeds, the oyster spat onto areas where it's hard bottom.
And we've done some test runs with that, and we're talking to some of the water management districts now about trying to do some pilot projects to see how that'll work. I mean, we think there's a lot of benefit, especially clams. I mean, oysters, obviously a great resource, but clams do a hell of a job in terms of water filtration, and they can grow like wildfire if you get them in the right places and keep predation down. So,
well, the predation, but also, anytime you talk to anybody, if you get to where you can outplant predation, that's whether it's oyster seed, seagrass seeds, whatever it may be. So if you can go out into an area and you can have say a drone go out and just blanket the area, a large area, it's going to be harder for fish to come in and just individually pick off those clams than it is if you just go out and take them off of a boat and dump them out. Yeah, you got like a whole pile there. So if you spread it out more, you can get a little larger area, a little more harder for the predation.
You're going to lose some just survivability and predation, but we think that larger footprint gives us a better opportunity to get some success.
I recently went to Sebastian Inlet with my family, and we went to go visit some friends up there. But I used to go up there all the time when I was younger. We call it going up coast, right? We as a guy who grew up a surfer, we would travel up because there's really not as consistent of like waves here as there are more in Central Florida. And so we'd go up to Sebastian Inlet all the time. That was like a big thing to do when we were in high school. And but as a kid, my mom used to take my brother and I when we were really little, and we would surf during the day. And on the other side of the bridge, there's that little kind of estuary, that little half moon kind of thing there, and it used to be riddled with clams. So we used to go clamming there all the time, and we just walk through with your feet, and you feel them, and you go, "I got one." You pick them up, and we just like buckets full of them, and there's none there now. And I don't know, someone, our friends that live in Melbourne, they're saying that they at one point in the 90s, some people came in with, and just like dug them all out, and then they're completely gone. But it doesn't seem like there's many other places in the state where you can do that anymore either. Right?
It's hard. I mean, that's the problem is there's some areas in Sarasota Bay where you still can, but as far as, I don't think in the IRL especially.
Well, the IRL is just damaged. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. Runoff, obviously, a big reason, but I personally attribute it to most of it being linked to septic systems. And there's a big move now to septic to sewer.
We've gotten rid of all of it here in Broward.
And Broward's done a good job with it. The Keys.
And Chip Lamarca, our local U.S. representative or state representative, Chip Lamarca, has done a great job on being on the forefront of getting that done.
Yep.
In fact, I think last year we took the last septic tank out of Lauderdale by the Sea. In the last apartment complex community that was there, and we're completely done now.
And more of that needs to happen. It's not cheap, I get it, but it's vital to fixing some of these systems. And I mentioned earlier about the Keys. I mean, the Keys got moved on that early on, right? And it took 20 years and I think over $1 billion or something, but it would have been god awful had it not happened.
Catastrophic.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, I remember first place I bought in the Keys, it was a lot that had a trailer on it, got converted to a stilt house, and it didn't have a septic system. It had a pipe that went into a limestone sump, and that was it.
Right.
And but it was at the time they were transitioning it over and got it on sewer, and that was good. But you go up and down all those canals and up and down the river, and it's just loaded with these big houses with no collector swales on the shoreline, big, beautiful green lawns and septic systems. And that is just a ton of nutrient influx. And that creates the same situation we were just talking about earlier about Lake Apopka, where you get all that sediment, you get all that nutrient loading, and you lose the visibility and you lose the vegetation and you start choking things out. You got to fix that problem. And the other thing I think ultimately you got to do in the IRL is you got to dredge a lot of it. You got to get that material out of there.
Well, that's what I was thinking when you were talking about the whole the muck situation in the Apopka. It's like, well, don't you have to get that out of there? I mean, you can't clean that, right?
You can, and at some point that's gonna have to be in the mix, but it is so expensive.
Sure.
And you look at a lake like Lake Apopka is nothing compared to Lake O. Lake Apopka it's massive. I mean, to get in and start picking away at that thing, and how do you dredge over here? And then because it's so big, it has its own tidal flow within it. It's its own level of circulation, and that sediment is it's like 80% of it's just in the water column. It just moves and goes.
Wow.
And so they've looked at systems where basically digging sumps, they've mapped kind of the circular flow in the lake, digging sumps in those areas, letting those fill up with the sediment as it circulates through, pumping it out.
Now, when
letting
you
it
say
fill up,
they,
pumping
you're
it out.
talking like an Army Corps of Engineers kind of thing?
Water Management District,
Water
FDP.
Management District. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about Lake Apopka, St. John's the driving force, kind of like when you talk about Lake O, it's South Florida.
Okay.
But it's a huge problem. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you can fix all the other things, but when we talked about the visibility at Lake Apopka, it's just that. Just running a boat through it stirs up so much. The fish swimming through it stirs up this sediment.
Well, this is why I wanted to have you guys on. Like, one of the biggest reasons, and when, thank God Harris linked this up, because, I always want to dig deeper into this situation, because we can talk about it till we're blue in the face, and people can pat themselves on the back all they want, saying, "Oh, we're doing all this for raising awareness for clean water and the health of our state and how things are flowing." But you really have to ask yourself, okay, how, right? All the time, like, keep deeper, like how, and like deeper and deeper you go. And you guys seem to be doing that, like, at working on the how. And that's really, really important, because you could say, oh, okay, we do beach cleanups, or we can do this little things, or we can, spread the message for recycling and all the other different environmental things you could do. It's like, well, yeah, but what's really going to make the difference? And I think what you guys are doing is really what's going to make the difference in all of this, right? Now, we could also say, okay, what can we do to minimize runoff? Or what can we do to minimize just chemicals being put along our coastal vegetation, period, or just runoff that's going on? I mean, I think there's more we can do, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, because you guys are the experts. But I think there's more that we can do to reduce the use of chemicals in our coastal vegetation than there is for runoff, because I think you might be able, with the population being so grand in the state, it's going to be very tough to kind of regulate that, with just because eventually there's so much you can do, only so much you can do, right, to minimize what runs off into the water from what people create naturally. If you look at the entire country of Australia, there's 28 million people in it. 24 million people live in the state of Florida.
Right.
And it is this compared to this in size, right? And I look at that, I'm like, man, we have a huge responsibility. Not only that, if you really look at the United States from 250 years ago, or however long it's been since we've established ourselves, right? And we've pioneered down to the Oregon and the Lewis and Clark and everything that they did to expand. Florida is like the last frontier of this country. Like, it wasn't until Flagler built the railroad did we really even start coming down here at all.
Right.
And if you look at the houses around here, like, oh yeah, that one's old. It's 30 years old. It's like, well, compared to the rest of the country, that's not old, but to us, it's old, right? So we're like the last frontier of the United States. And our first run of development wasn't so good. We talked about the septic and all that stuff, right? And we didn't really have the foresight to really develop the land properly. So I think it's up to us to really look at this right now and rebuild the right way. And what you guys are doing, and I think it's important to mention or re-mention what you guys mentioned about building it back to the way its natural habitat, the way it was when we found it, kind of thing. And I think it's really important. So with that mindset, take me through how you guys feel what is the value that you guys feel in your hearts to your mission and what you're bringing to the state of Florida. Is that a loaded question? Or?
Of course it is, but I'll let Beau take it.
Sorry about that, but
Go ahead.
I threw a lot in there at once.
Me?
Yeah.
Look, I'm
like, 'cause you got to have a passion for this to be able to do what you guys do.
I take a lot of heat because of what my day job is with environmental permitting, primarily for developers.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a means to an end, right? I mean, everybody lives in a house, everybody drives on roads. I mean, there's no way around development, and people continue to move here. It's going to continue to grow. So you have to have smart development, and you have to focus on regional aspects. I'm not a big fan of, and I'm going to talk about before I get to the specifics of the title stuff, but I'm not a big fan of saving a little wetland in the middle of a subdivision or a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather as bad as it sounds, fill in all those little wetlands here and there and move everything out to large tens of thousands of acres of land, of regionally managed property that's owned by the state, that's got millions of dollars of endowment that we know is going to be managed properly for centuries to come, and stuff that's never going to be touched and never screwed up and anything else, and densify all the areas that people want to live in. What we're trying to do, particularly with Aquaticus, is, you know, it's really more tied to just those purely aquatic systems, the rivers, the estuaries, right offshore. And, you know, we're trying to branch, you know, one of the things we haven't talked about yet is coral. We're trying to branch into coral as well.
Yeah, I definitely want to bring that up.
But, you know, our goal is, and seagrass is a really interesting plant, right? And Beau can talk about this for days, but I mean, it's one of the best plants when it comes to, you know, we hear about carbon credits and, you know, carbon uptake and everything else. One of the best plants existing, maybe the best, is
one of the best. Mangoes, seagrass.
Yeah, seagrass for taking up that carbon. And that's just one thing. What it does for the ecosystem in terms of nursery and all the micro habitats within the seagrass area, and what it does, it creates that whole food chain, and that's why you see FWC linking seagrass and habitat viability to fish take, because it's all intertwined. And if you don't have that entire food chain and you don't have that nursery area, you end up having nothing. So, you know, our goal is just to try to go in. It's something we have a passion for. We'd like to work in this arena, and we'd like to find ways to get some of these areas back to their native condition. Unfortunately for us, just planting grass isn't going to do it. It's going to take more. It's going to take all these aspects. It's going to take getting rid of those septic systems. It's going to take dealing with runoff in areas that no one has a right to deal with runoff. It's going to take dredging. It's going to take things that are going to make people uncomfortable and cost money. And we know that, and, you know, we're trying to do our step, and our step in this, at least as I see it, I think as you see it, is let's do this. Let's see what kind of results we can get. Like I mentioned earlier with Lake Apopka, I mean, the results we got are something I would have never dreamed we were going to get. And I'm very thankful and glad that it happened. The district's pleased. Everybody that's seen it's pleased. But, you know, I think it's nothing short of a miracle the way that grass has grown in there. So,
well, it seems like a good case study for the future, right?
Absolutely.
You know, and I mean, and don't you feel that it's time to get uncomfortable about it all? I mean, I mean, we're at a point of the state where, like, 24 million people, look, it's like we got to do something here.
We're seeing it. I mean, DeSantis has spent a lot of money, and he could have vetoed a lot of these things this last budget.
Right.
Would have been real easy to just line item veto out this couple million here, this couple million there, and he let most of the environmental projects go through.
Well, he spent more money than any government has, like by far.
And, you know,
on our,
had he redlined some of that stuff, I don't know that it would have caught a whole lot of news. I mean, it doesn't matter what he does, he's going to catch news, but it wouldn't have gone over. And he made the commitment. He could have easily stacked up more in the reserves, or put it to some other earmarked item for nothing. So I think he's made a commitment. I think the move you saw, what he did with the South Florida Water Management District Governing Board. Right. I mean, Chauncey, sharp guy. He's done a good job there, I think. I mean, I disagree with him and the board on a few things, but that's part of the business. But overall, I think they've done a good job, and they've made water quality and restoration paramount for them, and they've done a very good job with that. And he's put some good folks on St. John's as well. Senator Bradley's on there. Cole Oliver, former chairman of Brevard Zoo. Chris Hughes, the Hells Bay guy, is on the board. So,
and how do you feel about his support with Alligator Ron Bergeron in the Everglades?
So I know Ron a little bit.
Okay.
I always liked Ron. I knew Ron from when he was on FWC. Ron's passionate, right?
He is.
I mean, he's dedicated. He's passionate. He's got an opinion. But, you know, I think Ron sees things the way I see things. He's got the Everglades are there. Ron's one of the biggest road builders in the country, right? And it's where things are, and protection of the Everglades, protection of those properties, and making sure they're managed properly, I think is all things Ron
that's the
would
key,
agree
right?
with.
I mean, yeah, because listen, we're not, and we make this clear on the show all the time. The difference between conservationists and environmentalists. I mean, we want to not blur that line anymore. It's like I'd love for that term to come back to where it's supposed to be. I think over time that the term environmentalist has gotten like bastardized and like turned into something that I don't think it was ever intended to be at this point, like from a political standpoint. I think that needs to come back to the conservation side a little bit more. Right? But from our standpoint on the show, like we're not against like development and progress or expansion or anything like that. We're about proper management of it and responsibility of it.
And I understand your point on those two words, but and maybe it has been bastardized, but I think when I think conservationist versus environmentalist, I think two extremely different people.
I do too.
And an environment.
And I want that to come back.
Well, I think the problem,
if possible.
I think
don't
the
know
problem
if it is
you run
possible.
into, and I see this, and you'll probably get some bad comments about this, but I mean, permitting development for a living, the notion that every little wetland, no matter where it is or what it is, should be preserved and left is asinine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no basis for it. A 1 acre wetland surrounded by parking lot doesn't do a damn bit of good for anybody.
Right. It's like an environmental ad.
Right. You lose. I mean, wetlands have what's called a contributing area, right? Based on topography, the rain that would normally fall in that area drains into that wetland, and that's its contributing area. So you build a parking lot around it, stormwater and runoff. You can't let the runoff go into the wetland, so all the water that would normally go there goes away. Mm-hmm. So you're eliminating its hydrologic period. You're caking out the whole mosaic of uplands and wetlands and everything else it linked to.
The flow, right?
So there's no movement of animals. It's surrounded now by all this development, so you can't have anything but maybe small mammals in there. There's no medium-sized or large mammals in there. Now you don't have hundreds of feet of buffer, so you have light intrusion. Everything changes. You're much better served taking out that acre and preserving 20 acres out where it's going to be owned by the state and managed in perpetuity, and creating this huge tens of thousands of acres of, call it whatever you want. I mean, they do it in Africa, right? I mean, It's the same thing we have out there. And that's, I know people don't like to hear it, but the state's going to continue to develop. It's better to develop that way than to develop with this shotgun pattern of wetlands and little preserve areas scattered all through urban and cities and everything else, and having no.
I couldn't agree with that more.
But
yeah,
you can't go through a regular development process anywhere without running into those folks that are like, falling on a sword to save a 1/4 acre wetland that, hell, may not have been a wetland to start with. It may have been a dugout cattle pond in the middle of a pasture, and they just ignore the big picture. Meanwhile, half these people live in a house that was probably built in a wetland. So I always find that interesting.
Right. Yeah.
But look, you're right. That if those two groups could align, let's call it, because I think for the most part, I would think everyone is a conservationist. I don't think anyone wants to see nature destroyed.
That term I think crosses all political lines.
I think that is right. I think that's a good term.
One thing that we can all agree on, and that's why we push that term more than any other. But I just think it's a shame because I look at people ask me, "Am I an environmentalist?" It's like, well, yeah. I want to preserve the environment. Isn't that what it means? You know what I mean? But it's become something else over the years.
And you're right. It may not be the appropriate way to look at it. But
right.
I think that's kind of where most folks have landed on what it is.
Yeah. What makes you passionate, Beau?
Let's see. Well, number one, I've got a 13-year-old daughter.
All right.
So, she loves to go boating, loves to, she loves to save everything. Like we had a small turtle in our backyard the other day. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we had to take Tony to his new home at the spring.
Yep.
So, but she loves,
you
all
want to tell
animals.
Dennis how you found that turtle?
It's in the front yard, but I thought the dog picked it up and put it in its mouth, and I thought it was a pickle chip or something.
Oh, really?
I was like, oh, what's this? You know,
And the dog had it in its mouth.
And it's a 5-month-old German Shepherd puppy, you know. So
man.
I'm like, great,
Yeah.
you know. Tony might have had one leg that wasn't looking too well, but he's fine now. But so no, it's it's just everything passionate. I'm sitting here looking at the sea turtle over here, and John and I through Aquaticus plants, we donate plants to Gumbo Limbo.
Oh, you
we
do?
Also, yeah.
Gumbo Limbo, such a great organization.
Yeah. So they had a sea turtle over there not too long ago. I mean, they were. First of all, we also collect the plants that are floating up, and we go back and wash them and clean them off, and we're actually vacuum sealing them, and we can freeze those. So we sell those by the case.
Really?
Yeah. So then that way, so we've got a distributor that actually sells stuff to all these different aquariums and places that actually have green sea turtles in captivity or they're doing rehab for them, and so they can give them natural diet versus romaine lettuce or that stuff. So, and these grasses are something that, that, like I said, they're just the leaves, like your tree loses the leaves and the leaves just float up or boats are on the ground. Those things come up. So we go and take those and then deliver them around.
So they're salvageable.
Yep. So then we do that with those. We're also collecting grass for the manatees right now. We have a weekly schedule with the Manatee Rehabilitation Partnership. And so this week on Wednesday, we'll go to Crystal River. The grasses all float up. We go wash them, clean them, so there's no algae and all that stuff on them. And then we'll put them in bins of 250-pound bins.
Mm-hmm.
And so this week is Jacksonville Zoo. And when they have animals there at the place there in Disney, we bring them grass for them as well. So every week we have a different delivery that we're actually just taking grass and giving it to them in their coolers to go take where it's, that's just strictly out of our... out of what we do.
You guys working with Disney at all?
So no, not working with Disney at all.
I've heard. I mean, all right, you talk about the Disney thing, but I mean, I heard they I'm wondering if their efforts over the last few years have been any better, because I know that their runoff contributions
go straight down,
are vast, right? I mean,
it's what we talked about earlier. I mean, we have that they get a new permit, things are different. Everything else that's there, it kind of is what it is.
So there's not much that they have to adhere to.
What's the name of their big lake right there? Seven
Lake
Seas,
Buena Vista,
the lake you go across, the Seven Seas or whatever. I mean, that's essentially nothing but a stormwater pond, but it's all connected by wetlands, but their situation's no different than anywhere else in the state. There's a lot of that could be looked at, but Disney's made efforts. I mean, I
hope they have. I mean,
they've got the
show just got canceled, by the way. We brought up Disney. The big bad rat's going to come hatching us.
The whole thing with DeSantis and the Reedy Creek Improvement District. I mean, but they were there to help manage some of these things, and that'll all work out however it works out. But Disney, we haven't done anything. We've had talks with SeaWorld.
Well, they've had, So Disney was just, it's only the places that actually had the manatees that they, so sometimes we go this week, we haven't been to Disney in 2 weeks. They released the manatees or whatever, so they didn't have any. But as far as other than that, having worked in the Keys for a long time and seeing how some of these banks, when you see the potholes or the prop scars on them, and what happens is a lot of these areas where if you didn't go in and fix it, it's kind of like that whole bank can erode away. I mean, I've seen actual pictures.
So it's almost like cancerous.
So let's say you have a boat that runs aground and he powers off his motor, creates that big blowhole, which if you see a picture of it, it looks like a big circle with all the prop scars around it. Well, as the water rushes in and out of there, it goes over it, down, and it starts to scour it out. So as it scours it out, then that creates the big channel where that whole entire bank can just disappear.
Oh, wow. And so you guys are restoring this.
So that was kind of about 10 years ago or so. I was up running the halls in Tallahassee trying to promote rapid response, which was basically, we've always said, if there's a pothole out in the road, you don't just let the pothole get bigger and bigger and bigger until the road falls apart. Some places they do. But generally
just kidding,
speaking,
City of Pompano, I love you.
So generally speaking, they go and they fix it or that, or if there's a wreck into a palm tree or something on the side of the road, they don't wait till the insurance company comes in and settles the claim before they go and clean that up or fix it. So the general idea was to have, the internal improvement trust fund for the state have money set aside to where you could go in if a boat ran aground. In the Keys, especially in Biscayne Bay, they have to if Towboat US comes to pull you off, they literally have to call law enforcement, and they've got to come cite you and give you a ticket. So they come and put
if you run aground.
If you run aground, so they'll
Yes.
come and they put a piece of PVC in, and they're like, okay, this is where Dennis ran aground at. And so then they come back and they send their biologist out and they do a damage survey to figure out how much damage you did and everything else.
That sounds cheap and affordable.
Oh yeah, and so then what happens is then they go
Wow.
back to Boat US and they're like, well, here's our cost. It's going to cost to fix this seagrass. And then Boat US, of course, their attorneys are like, well, now we've got to hire somebody to come in and do a damage assessment on it because we don't really like what yours look like, so we're going to go get our own
Like
estimate.
an adjuster?
Yeah, and so then they, so they would hire us to go in and actually look at it. I mean, there was like a $5 million case in Biscayne
Right.
National Park, and so it wasn't that much to fix on the private industry side. But so anyway, the thing is that if you went in and you had, say you had contractors that you would, same kind of guys for your roads or whatever, but seagrass experts that would go in and utilizing methods that have been developed by FWC, DEP, NOAA to actually go in and fix this, then it would just kind of be like, here's the bill. So that way, Boat US, you got a guy that has insurance for, every Boat US policy, you have insurance on there for natural resource damage.
Wow. Hey, Yanni, can you do me a favor? Can you write down a note? Don't open that Sea Tow franchise. Right? It's not worth it.
So,
That's crazy.
Yeah. So then, but if you did that, so then it's like, okay, so but here's the bill, and then Boat US is just kind of like, here's what it costs to actually fix this.
Wow.
But what you did was you fixed that, and basically, like you said with cancers, but you stop the bleeding. You've enabled that so it's not, so it'll grow back.
I agree with restoring it,
And
but that's a lot of stuff to go through.
Well, and that's the thing is that isn't it just easier if they just said, okay, you ran aground and now here's our certified contractors and hire somebody to go
Right.
out and fix it.
If I think
Everyone wants to get paid, though, right?
Well, yeah, but what Beau is trying to do with that, and we're gonna take a stab at it again this year, is create a program where basically you have some set costs. It's this much area, it's this
Right.
much cost. The money's there. You can make the move, and then, sort out this detail, and then replenish those funds. But the longer it sits, the worse it gets. I mean, it's a Venturi effect, right? So
Right.
that water moves in and out, just like you see those channels move around through some of these sandbars. It's the same thing, and it can wipe it all out.
Wow. So, talk to me a little bit about what you guys are doing with coral reefs.
Not much yet.
Not much yet. Well, what do you want to do with it?
We'd like to get into kind of the same thing we're doing with seagrass, but with coral.
Okay.
And we're in the middle right now of
Like doing like polyp farms and stuff?
basically.
basically,
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
trying to secure a facility in the Keys right now, with a dual purpose of seagrass and coral
And mangroves.
and mangroves and
Okay.
oysters and clams and
So we're
lobster. We think we can
Lobster.
stack it full of lobster too, but
Papa's Pilar, who is sponsor of the show, one of our title sponsors. They are coming up with the Hemingway Reef Rebirth Collective, and we should talk about that, about getting involved with that after the show.
okay.
And maybe there's something we can do there to
Absolutely.
help out and get involved. And definitely, it's a new program that we're just starting up with Papa's Pilar, but it's a collective working with Moat Marine. And other organizations all around, and it's basically to where it's a diversion of funds, right? That this gets put to the people that, like, Papa's Pilar is not taking anything; they're diverting the funds to giving it to the people who need it or who are actually going to use it. And this is Steve Groth, the owner and CEO of Papa's Pilar. He's what he's claimed as this is now his life's mission. And to rebuild the reefs through this collective, and that is a cause that we are definitely 100% behind. So we're excited about it.
So one of the other things we're working with Moat on is during this 100 acres we were going to do statewide, is Moat's. They were going to, now we're going through a transition to move that into next year, but they were going to do genetic studies of the seagrass. And so it's kind of going to be a partnership with us and them as far as getting the different grasses from around the state. So
Okay.
they could hire geneticists and they could actually go through and see, like, is this seagrass better for the Indian River Lagoon because it's going to be, better, shade tolerant. It's going to be hot, heat tolerant, hot water, cold water, all that stuff. So they could see maybe then they would have their own genetic bank, like there in Sarasota right now. They've got like a bomb shelter that you can actually, they have all the different coral, some different genomes of the coral in there as well. So they can kind of have a bank that if we had a farm in the Keys and we were growing seagrass and coral and a hurricane came through and wiped it out, that the whole gene bank wouldn't be gone.
Oh, wow.
So
I volunteered when I was in college there.
At Moat?
Went out to Ringling, yeah. I volunteered there for a while with their shark tanks, and they did some artwork for them and stuff like that. So
when you were at Ringling, did you go to the Bye Bye Hut at all?
No. Where's
the Bye Hi Hut?
No. What's that?
The Bye Hi Hut?
Where's that?
It's in the hotel right there. It's the place that had the Mai Tais in Sarasota.
In downtown?
No, it was it's
we
like
went to
right
the
there.
Half Moon Pub or whatever.
It was right
across?
there by when you come out of Ringling and take a right. It was right across from the airport there.
Okay, down near the airport. Yeah, no, we were mostly the Siesta Key, Longboat Key.
How long ago were you there? Were you at the Quay?
92. Yeah.
Yeah. So remember the old so there was there was the Quay. There was the anyway.
You take me way back. It's been a while.
I grew up in Bradenton.
Oh, okay.
So I used to go. We used to go to there all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
Daiquiri deck.
Yeah. And Sarasota's an interesting place. You know what I mean? It's it was an interesting place to be at. It was my first West Coast experience, and then it's funny you come to the town and like says welcome to Sarasota, and it's also in French because they get so many like Canadian tourists there, and but it was a cool place, man. We loved hanging out in the Siesta, and going fishing all up and down the bridges and places through there. We had a good time in Sarasota. Yeah, definitely had a good experience there. So let me ask you guys, with everything that you do. And all the efforts that you guys have made over the past few decades and all your efforts, we kind of have the mindset here when it comes to conservation that there's no goal. We can't have a goal. We're never going to reach a goal because once you're satisfied with a goal, that means you're going to stop. Right? And this is something that you can never stop doing. It's something that's going to be ongoing when it comes to I'm talking about the blanket term of conservation. And that, it's not, there's no finish line, there's no end game, but if you could have a goal, when it's all said and done, what would that be? Like, what's your ideal outcome in all this?
So for me, I think there's enough movement in conservation of lands and management and all that within the interior of the state. For me, ultimately, I think it's a water quality issue, and there's been such a. I mean, I've seen it just in my life. I mean, I spent a lot of time in high school and college doing cave and cavern diving at Peacock Springs and Jenny Springs and Itchinatucknee and Manatee Springs, all over the place, and the level of water quality. I mean, everything used to be crystal clear. I lived, 10 minutes from Hospital Hole on the Weeki Wachee River, and just all the decline in water quality in those rivers over the years has just been it's amazing. And I've seen it, right? So I've been around long enough, and I've been in these areas, the IRL, and I've seen it happen. And getting that water quality back would be a phenomenal goal. How to do that is, there's efforts. I mean, it's being made. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I said it earlier. I think dredging is a huge part of it. I think it's hard to get in front of the problem when you have that giant issue just sitting in the water column. I always think that's going to be a detriment to the accomplishment of what you're trying to do. But look, the little things, kind of to Beau's point earlier, you can't, going out and planting one sprig of seagrass isn't going to do a damn bit of good, but 50,000, 100,000 of them does. And if you take some of these areas, and taking out one septic system doesn't do any good, but if you can take out the whole street, that does. If you can get everybody on that street to start using no fertilizer or better fertilizer, great. Put in drainage swales, great. Those are the type of things. And look, it's got to be more of a movement. There's not going to be any way to decrease some of this stuff. I mean, you can't. There's just certain things you're never going to get away with doing with existing property owners and property rights and everything else. But if every little bit helps, in my opinion, on the water quality issue, because it's going this way. It just, at least get it to level out, right? Mm-hmm. If nothing else, I mean, you need to turn it back the other way, but you've got to do whatever we can do, and every little bit's going to help. But it can't be too small. I mean, like I was saying, I mean, just getting one guy to get off a septic doesn't do it. That whole street needs to go. That whole subdivision that's sitting on the barrier island needs to get it fixed. And we have it everywhere. I mean, we're talking a lot about seagrass on the coast, and I know that's a lot of where you live, but even inland, I mean, we look at the Wekiva River and around the springs, and Gemini Springs has got issues. Wekiva River's got Springs has issues. Lake Jessup is a disaster. Lake Apopka. I mean, these are areas that have been, that got degraded years and years ago, and haven't had a chance or had any funding to get back where they need to be. And
what area of the state you think is the worst right now?
I mean, to me, I don't know what's the worst. I mean, what we're seeing at Apalachicola Bay is very concerning, obviously. But probably the area that I think is the most important, and that we really need to spend a lot of time and effort on, is, the IRL and the ICW through that area. I mean, it's so much wildlife movement through there, and such so much degradation in water quality and everything else. I think that's an area. You have so many people there, and it's really a focal point of Florida, especially now with space industry coming back and everything else.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's like starting to resurrect again. The Indian River Lagoon and the Mosquito Lagoon and all that. So like Mosquito Lagoon used to be such a hot spot for redfish, and it's like now it's like
I think
tough,
that's to me that's probably, I don't know if it's the worst area. I don't know. I don't know that I'm qualified to get in that, but to me it's maybe the most important.
Yeah.
Because of how it sits out there. I mean, Lake O gets a ton of attention, and rightfully so, and the Everglades themselves. But I mean, don't get me started on the Everglades and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and pythons and everything else out there. But I mean, I think from an optics standpoint, I think IRL is probably right up there, if not number one.
Gotcha. But what's your goal in all this?
I don't know. I think that just number one, I think seagrass, it doesn't get its value by people don't really understand the importance of it as much. People are kind of like, oh, it's seagrass. Oh, it's that funky stuff that, gets between my toe, whatever, it's not sexy. Like people don't go to the Keys to go dive in the seagrass. They go dive on a reef.
Right.
FWC's done many studies on, reef fish where they've gone out and they've found that there's actually seagrass DNA in within their food chain, that they eat stuff. So it's kind of like, we explain to people that, seagrass can live without coral, but coral can't live without seagrass. So by, I think that part of it, a lot of it is education. I mean, we can have a goal of putting plants in the ground, but I think the more people we educate, the better off we are. Because, we sponsor the exhibit at the Florida Aquarium, the seagrass exhibit, so that way people come through, they can see the different damages, all the stuff that kind of goes along with it, but also that ties into like the BP area, it's just all this, the importance of the grass versus just being like, it's a pain, like I can't build my dock or I can't dredge my canal because I've got seagrass in it. People would never say that about coral. They wouldn't say, oh, I can't dredge this because there's
Right.
coral in the way.
And mangroves for that matter at this point too. So
Right.
everyone's fully aware. I mean, you hear these stories about people, people come from up north and they buy this intercoastal home and then like, oh, all these trees are in the back and they hack them down and then they're facing $1 million fine and they don't understand why. I think at this point, everyone's fully aware that don't touch the mangroves.
Right.
Right.
But it's with the seagrass, it's kind of like, they don't understand the full importance of what they're doing up in their yard is actually affecting what's underneath the water out in the bay, So kind of my overlying goal is just to do as much as I can in my lifetime to support younger generations. I mean, everybody that I have working for me is probably, some of them are just out of college, so everybody's, and some of them are in between that, 20 to 30-year-old range. And I think they want to save the world and save seagrass and get everybody out there doing it. So my goal is just to continue on with my passion for 20-something years of doing seagrass work and to kind of get that transpired into some of my other, my employees and the younger generation.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And then, my goal will be the outlaw roundup in the state, but we'll see if we can make that happen. I don't know if we got it in us. So that's awesome, guys. Listen, I mean, thank you so much for coming in today. Thank you for driving in for this. We appreciate the effort of you guys coming down here, down south to see us and have this great conversation with us. And I learned so much today. And I hopefully our crowd of listeners and watchers did too, and I hope they really understand the value and the importance of everything that you guys talked about today, because it really, really is important, if not the most important thing, I think, that this state is dealing with right now. Really, I believe that. Well,
speaking of Roundup in the state of Florida, so one of the things that we have been doing a lot of in the last 2 years is getting grasses to different universities and stuff for doing research, not for genetics, but for typical like undergrad research projects and graduate research projects. So there's a young lady at the University of Florida who is doing a study on the seagrasses to see if there's traces of the Roundup in the seagrass, if it would affect the sea turtles.
Really?
She's doing that study right now.
So it's in progress now.
We're giving her grass.
I know they did a reef study here locally recently, and they found Roundup on the reefs.
Yeah. So
and obviously there's no one going out there and spraying the reefs, so it's got to come from
right. Yeah, but it's amazing to see all the people that have these different the other projects are kind of going on, and is this affecting the seagrass, and what is the end effect of this? I mean, she's a sea turtle researcher, so she was wanting the grass for the sea turtles, but also to make sure that she could see if there was anything in that grass.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, we don't get overly political on the show, but if we do have two causes on the show, it's clean water and the supporting of United States veterans, right? And those are two things that we're very, very passionate about, and I hopefully our goal on all that by bringing people like yourselves on the show and just talking about it all the time is that it will inspire a younger generation and an older generation too to say, hey, maybe my pattern in life that I've been doing this whole time is maybe I need to change a little bit too, and just like adjust here and there, or maybe educate my children in a way where they can have a more conservation mindset or some sort of a restoration type of mindset is important, because I think if we keep going down the path that we've been going down, then the state's it's not sustainable, So, but gentlemen, tell everyone where to find you. How can they support you? How can people get involved in what you're doing, or is there any way that that would be helpful for people to understand what you're doing to reach out to you?
I don't know what. So we have aquaticusplants.com is one of our main websites, and you can always find us at seacowchow.com as well.
All right, seacowchow.
Yeah, we're always looking for a way to feed the manatees. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. And don't feed them water from the hose. Right?
No.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. So I see a lot of people doing that all the time. That is not the right thing to do. No. So, all right, cool. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Very much. If you're in the market for a new truck or family vehicle, please call our good friends over there at Joey Carty Cruster Dodge Jeep Ram. They just unleashed the Wagoneer, which they have plenty in stock, which if you are a truck driver like we are, then you know that those are not the easiest things to find these days, but the Wagoneers, they have them in stock, and they're gorgeous. They're beautiful. Skip was just in here last week, and he is Joey Carty's boat captain, and he said he got into one the other day, and he's just this absolutely remarkable vehicle. So we've been drinking Papa's Pilar rum all evening. The sherry cask is always my preferred rum, right? So you gentlemen enjoyed the sherry cask?
Yeah, I need a refill.
Yeah, we're gonna go wrestle up to the bar and hang out for a little bit after this. So you can tell me all more about Seagrass because I can't get enough of it. I told you I geek out on this stuff. I really do. So the Papa's Pilar family is just amazing to get involved with. We mentioned the Hemingway Reef Collective, and there's going to be more on the show about that coming up soon. It's a very new program. We'd like to once again welcome our good friends at Baron Burton's W Sauce, right, for being a part of the show now. I'm sure you guys are going to be hearing more about this as things go on. We're going to be sharing recipes, and we're going to be doing great things, and I'm going to be telling you about how much I love it on everything that I eat, I'm sure. And then wrestle up to go over to Papa's Raw Bar and wrestle up yourself something from the Connected by Water sushi menu, and you will not be disappointed, right? We thank our friends from Starbright. Right? And we're looking for do-gooders. So if you are a do-gooder, if you know of a do-gooder, why don't you go ahead and reach out to us on Instagram at Dennis Friel Art, at Connected by Water, or go over to see Corey at Sea Redwine, SEA Redwine, or at Starbright_com, and just say, hey, I got a do-gooder for you, and get them nominated to win a bucket full of $200 worth of goodies there from Starbright. So cool, we good? Now we're going to sign off. Your ego is not your amigo. Always do your best, and at the end of the day, just let God do the rest, and do not ever forget that no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, we're all connected by water. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.